Okay, I think this is number 14, and it looks like we're probably going to wrap this up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then I'll have to go back to work and find something else to preach on. It seems like I get inspiration on a need-to-know basis. Right now I don't need to know, so I don't have anything that I'm working on, but I'm sure something will show up in time. We are now at a section that runs from verse 44. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 44 through verse 49. We won't do all of this morning. We'll probably just do the first couple of verses. So beginning at verse 44, it is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. Now we went over a whole bunch of issues about bodies over the last couple of weeks. And we're following along with that same type of an idea. Sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The last Adam was made a quickening spirit. Howbeit that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterward that which is spiritual. The first man is of the earth, earthy. The second man is the Lord from heaven. As is the earthy, such are they also that are earthy. And as is the heavenly, such are they also that are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the earthy, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. So this is a principle that's actually in our basic Bible doctrine series. The idea that there are heavenly things and there are earthly things, and you work from the top down. Now the way the human race works is we have this earthly body first. Someday we will have a spiritual body, and we'll look into a little bit into that today as to what that really means and what it is. I will tell you now, it does not mean that you become a spirit. You still have a body. It's just labeled as a spiritual body, as we'll see as we move through this. So our body is sown a natural body, and it is raised a spiritual body. When we die and are buried in the ground, however you go about doing that, that's the picture of being sown, is it not? When you sow a seed, you bury it in the ground, and you expect something to come up out of the ground from that seed. That's the picture that Paul's been making through this entire section. He's been likening this to taking a body, burying it or sowing it, and then it raising again, just like a corn stalk or anything that you would plant in the ground. You sow it in the ground, you expect something to come back up out of the ground. Now, the main difference is you sow corn in the ground, you don't expect that to last 2,000 years before it grows again, right? You expect it to come up pretty quick. Where this, you're sown in the ground, and you're not going to come out of the ground until the resurrection, whenever that might actually be. So you're sown a natural body, you're raised a spiritual body. The body that is now natural will be made spiritual. But it'll still be a body. It'll be a spiritual body. It won't be a spirit. It will be a spiritual body. So we're not looking at this from the standpoint of natural versus spirit. We're looking at from the standpoint of natural body versus spiritual body. So we'll define that so that you can see what it is that I'm talking about. I want you to look first at Luke chapter 24, and we'll get a picture of this spiritual body. Because remember, the Lord Jesus Christ at his resurrection was raised in a body like what we will be raised in when at the resurrection. Luke chapter 24, beginning at verse 36. Luke 24, 36. And as they thus spake, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. But they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. And he said unto them, Why are ye troubled, and why do thoughts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me, and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones, as you see me have. And when he had thus spoken, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they yet believed not for joy, and wondered, he said unto them, Have ye here any meat? And they gave him a piece of boiled fish and of a honeycomb, and he took it and did eat before them. So his body was a body. You could still touch it. You could still handle it. He could still eat, and you didn't see, like in the cartoons, where you can watch the food go down into the stomach on a ghost or no, it wasn't that. It was him. His identity was the same, but his body was different, because notice they're sitting in a room and all of a sudden he appears. He doesn't walk through a door, doesn't knock, just shows up and presents himself in a body. But it's a spiritual body, not a natural body. And that's the point that we're trying to look at. Now, there is a natural body, and every one of you have one. Natural means having a real or physical existence as opposed to what is spiritual, intellectual, fictitious, etc. The Greek word that's translated natural is pasokikos. It's derived from pasoki, which refers to the seat of life, and is translated both soul and life in the Bible. So this word is translated soul and life. Look at Matthew chapter 6. And we're going to look at verse 25. Matthew 6, 25. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life. That's the Greek word, pasoki, which is translated life and also soul. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, not yet for your body what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body more than raiment? That's that same word. Now look at Matthew chapter 10 and verse 28. And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. Pasuki, that's that word. But rather fear him which is able also to destroy both body and soul, both soul and body in hell. So this word is translated in both cases. Look at Matthew 16, 25 and 26. Matthew 16, 25 and 6. For whosoever will save his life, there's that word, shall lose it, and whatsoever whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profited if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? There it is again. There's that word. You see, this is referring to that natural, to your natural man. Your natural man has this thing, has this soul. So this is not talking about gaining the whole world and ended up in hell, is it? It's talking about the natural man. Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Again, it's talking about that soul. And we'll see what a soul is in just a couple of minutes. This is one of those ones where I can't tie everything together like I'd want to, where I can stack it like building blocks. I'm going to have to go a couple of steps and then we'll put a whole bunch of blocks on there. So just hang on to this thought for just a couple of more minutes. Look at Mark chapter 3 and verse 4. Can't get the pages open. Mark chapter 3 and verse 4. And he saith unto them, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath day, or to do evil, to save life? There's that word again. Or to kill. So bear in mind that this word that we're talking about is that word, the Greek word translated natural. And then finally, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And verse 45, which is where we are right now. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. Okay? In other words, as we're told in Genesis 2:7, when God breathed into Adam, here he makes this man out of the dirt, and he breathes into him. And man, we're told, man became a living soul. A man has a soul. A natural man has a soul. Now, a soul is an essential principle or attribute of life and related senses. The condition or attribute of life in humans or animals, animate existence, this viewed as a possession of which one is deprived at death. So a natural man has a soul. Without a soul, you don't exist. Well, you might still exist as a dead body, but you can't live. The principle of life is in the soul. So you can't have a person without a soul. This is one of the reasons they have not been able to create people, even though they got all the materials down here on the ground. They could do that. But without a soul, you don't have a human, and you don't have life without the soul. At death, the soul and the spirit go back to God. Body goes in the ground. Without a soul, there's no life. When I was a kid, the first horror movie that I ever saw, and it was old then. I think that it was originally filmed in like 1935. I'm certainly not that old, but it was called The Bride of Frankenstein. And you remember in the whole Frankenstein idea, you take a dead body and they'd build this elaborate system so that they could charge the body with electricity, right? And then with the electricity, the body would then come to life. Well, that doesn't work. It won't work. There's no soul. And you get your soul from God. That's where it comes from. So without a soul coming from God, you have no life. And at death, the soul leaves. But a natural body is a body with a soul. A natural man, the man that is sown natural, is a man that up until his death had a soul. Therefore, as we've studied last week and the week prior, had identity. And since all of the identity is programmed within the soul, as long as that spirit and soul are in that body, that's who that body is. When the spirit and soul leave, The body's just a pile of chemicals and some dirt, and that's it. And a soul and body belong together. That's how they were designed to begin with. Sin is what brought their division at death. Had Adam not sinned in the Garden of Eden, we wouldn't have that issue. And you would have a natural body with a soul, and you would not be subject to death. You're subject to death because of what Adam did in the garden. The soul possesses the identity of the body. It indwells and can be recognized by the person when disembodied. This answers a question that was asked to me a couple of weeks ago. Well, how is it that the people in heaven can tell one another apart if they don't have a body? Well, because the soul is recognizable to someone that has the ability to look at those types of things, which you have when you're in heaven. When you're in heaven, you're able to see these things that you can't see today. So you can still see the souls of people and tell who they were. You know that's Uncle Fred. You can spot his identity even though he doesn't have a body at that point. Because remember, it's not the body that gives you the identity, it's the soul that gives you the identity. So wherever that soul is, it's still Wendy, still Jim, still Zach, wherever it is, whether it's in your body or not. Now, let me give you an example. Turn to Deuteronomy chapter 34. Verses 5 and 6. Deuteronomy 34, verses 5 and 6. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab over against Beth Peor, but no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. So Moses died, and he's buried. And as all buried things happen over a period of time, he rots. Now, I want you to look at Matthew chapter 17. Verses 1 through 3. And after 6 days, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias talking with him. How'd they know it was Moses? Moses was dead and buried in a grave thousands of years before this. How the heck did they know it was Moses? Well, because the identity of Moses isn't in that body laying in a grave somewhere. The identity of Moses is in his soul, and that's what was transfigured before them. So you see, even if you're disembodied, you can still recognize someone's soul if you have the ability to recognize those types of things. Look at another case. Look at Luke chapter 16. Verses 22 through 25. We're talking about Lazarus and the rich man. It said it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. So now here we have two disembodied people, right? Lazarus left his body on this earth when he left and went to heaven. The rich man was buried in the ground and left his body in a grave somewhere. But they still have souls, don't they? And the soul is where the identity is. And in hell he lift up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. Well, how in the world did he see Lazarus in Abraham's bosom in heaven? How did he see it? Well, the soul of Lazarus was still present, and that's where the identity is. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tongue of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. So you see, the soul, the seat of the identity of the person, and the thing that makes the body live, still has the identity. And if you're able to see souls, which you would be in heaven, then you're able to see the souls of those people, even though they don't have a body. The soul is that vital principle that causes the body to process its nutrients so as to produce tissue with its specific identity. This is deduced from the fact that in the absence of the soul, the body decomposes. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Verses 6 and 7. Wherever the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. At death, the spirit and the soul return to God. The body goes into the ground, turns right back into dust again. But it's the spirit and soul where you have your identity. Now, this word that we just talked about, a Greek word pisokikos, is also translated in another way. In James chapter 3, and verse 15 is translated as sensual. James 3:15. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. So this natural body is sensual. In Jude verse 19, these be they who separate themselves, sensual, having not the Spirit. So sensual is of or pertaining to the senses or physical sensation, sensory, of persons, their dispositions, conduct, etc., absorbed in the life of the senses, indifferent to intellectual and moral interests, in religious use, destitute of spiritual life, worldly, irreligious. Remember that a born-again child of God has been changed. Prior to that, you're no different than anybody else. You're sensual, you're devilish, you're earthly, until you're born again. At the point that you're born again, your soul and spirit are changed. The inner man is changed. But prior to that, you're no different than anyone else. You're just as sensual, just as devilish as anyone else. So this soul that we have, being the thing that animates the body, it animates the senses, it animates the appetites. Without the soul, the body senses and it craves nothing. It has no desire once the body's dead, because the soul's not there anymore. It doesn't have anything to bring that about. By means of the bodily senses, the soul relates to this world. So it gives the body an appetite for the things needful to its survival and propagation. That's what one of the things the soul does. It's the thing that causes you to crave certain things. It's the thing that causes you to desire certain things. It's the thing that flips all those switches. Now, prior to the new birth, what do you think those cravings are going to be? You have no desire to serve God. Your desires are only earthly. They're only for the things of the flesh. So prior to the new birth, those are the switches that it's flipping. After the new birth, those switches should change, should they not? You should be desiring other things. You should be desiring to serve God. But that's how that whole system works. So if someone is sitting here with a newborn in their inside, and that newborn is not born again, it's only born once it's born the first time, it's going to come out of the womb just as devilish as anyone else. When it's born again, it will start to seek other things. That's why it is that so many people finally get around to finding what God's doing. The people in this room, the members of this church, evidence the fact that they were born again by the fact that they listened to what the Bible says. And they're fed off of that. Those that aren't born again don't get fed off of this stuff. This is just a nightmare to them. Now, in some respects, a man's soul isn't that much different from the soul of an animal. Animals have souls also. There are some differences, but they have a soul. They would have to, otherwise they wouldn't be alive, because it's the soul that animates the creature. When your dog passes away, the soul leaves it. Now, it doesn't go to the same place that ours do, but it does leave. The soul leaves, and now you have a dead animal. Same way with a person. I quoted Genesis 2:7 earlier, that God breathed into Adam and he became a living soul. And that phrase, living soul, translate the same Hebrew words that are rendered living creature over in Genesis 1:21 and 1:24. Genesis 1:21, and God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind, and God saw that it was good. So that every living creature here, all of the whales and winged fowl, all of these different creatures are living souls the same way that man is a living soul. Now, there's some differences between those souls, but they still have one. And that's what animates their life. Verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. So both animals and men have souls and spirits. Look at Numbers chapter 31. Verse 28. And Levi, a tribute unto the Lord, of the men of war which went out to battle, one soul of 500, both of the persons and of the beeves and of the asses and of the sheep. A beeve is an ox. So ox have souls, and asses, donkeys have souls, sheep have souls. Now, their soul's different than ours in some respects, but it's still a soul. Any living creature that walks around has a soul, same way that we do. And when they die, that soul's gone, and they lose the ability to walk around. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And verse 21. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? You see, the spirit of man goes upward, goes back to God. The spirit of the beast goes into the ground. So unlike an animal, here's one of the main differences between an animal and a human, and that is that a man's soul and spirit have rational intelligence, and they survive the death of the body, where the soul and spirit of an animal doesn't. They don't survive that. They're not subject to judgment day like humans are. In Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. Revelation chapter 6, verse 9. And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. You see, John sees these souls under the altar. Well, they don't have bodies, but he saw the souls, and they live on. Your soul lives on. That doesn't happen with an animal. But when we die, our soul lives on. Now, with the fall of man in the garden, the bodily appetites have been put in control to the defiance of the will of God, not in satisfying them. That's one of the things that happened in the Garden of Eden. When Adam fell, it made a change to us. Now we no longer desire to serve God. We desire to be in defiance to him, to do the things he doesn't want us to do. And that's the battle that we have to battle with our entire lives here, because you're kind of caught in between two different ways. On the one hand, you want to do this, but you know you shouldn't. And the things that God tells you to do, yeah, you don't really want to do that. I want to do this. That's the battle that we're fought in. So when we talk about an unregenerate man, someone that's not born again, look at Romans chapter 8, verses 4 through 8. That the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. So those that walk after the flesh in this context, we're talking about people that aren't born again. Those that walk after the Spirit, those that are born again. Okay? For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh. Well, because their soul is geared to those appetites, leading them to those decisions. But they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Got where I am here. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. Unregenerate people cannot please God. Period. Now that causes a problem for most religion, because most religion says you as an unregenerate person have to please God in order to be accepted of him. And you can't do it. You can't please him. Not just do you not want to, you can't do it. But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he's none of his. And if Christ be in you, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. But if the Spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his Spirit that dwelleth in you. So while we live in this life, we struggle. In the resurrection, we won't. In the resurrection, the body we get won't be this natural body. It won't be a natural body that tends to go towards things that are against what God says. It'll be a spiritual body. That doesn't mean it won't be a body, but it won't have the same proclivities. It won't have the same desires to do things that are against the teaching of God that we have to deal with down here on this rock. Okay, so that's a natural body. The next section says there is a spiritual body. Spiritual is defined as of or pertaining to, affecting or concerning the spirit or higher moral qualities, especially as regarded in a religious aspect. The body will be given spiritual qualities such as angels, which are spirits, currently possess. And that's kind of a cool thing. I'm kind of looking forward to that. So while it'll be a body, it won't be the same kind of body that we're stuck with now. If we look at Christ after the resurrection, we can get some ideas as to what this spiritual body will be like. And again, it won't be a spirit. It'll be a body. It's something you can touch, something you can handle, something that can eat, something that we're used to, if you will. But our body, it'll be made like the resurrected body of Christ, which was not subject to a lot of the confinements of our natural bodies. Just simply wasn't. Luke chapter 24 and verse 31. Have you ever been in a situation where you just wish you could disappear? Just vanish and not be there anymore? You ever been in a situation like that? Ever? I have. Well, you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to just poof, be gone. Look at, where were we? Luke 24:31. And their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished out of their sight. These people saw Christ, realized who he was gone. You'll be able to do that. You can't do that now. Can you? Anybody in here that can just vanish? No. But you'd be able to do that. You'll be able to do that then. Here's something else. Angels, their primary mode of existence is spirit. And yet they can materialize. We're told in one passage, and I forget where it is, and I forget the exact wording of it, but I'll paraphrase it. Basically, be careful with folks, because you don't know. Some have entertained angels unawares. They've actually had angels come into their lives, and they look like people. When they materialize, they look like people. Enough like people that you think they're human. That's something that angels can do. That's something that we'll be able to do the opposite of. Where we appear to be humans, we can vanish, we can become non-material. Look at Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 7. Hebrews 1 and verse 7. And of the angels he saith, who maketh his angels spirits, and his ministers a flame of fire? Angels are spirits. You see any of them sitting around here right now? I hope not. Doesn't mean they're not here. We don't know where they are. They're spirits. You can't see them. But now look at Genesis chapter 19. And we'll see that angels have the ability to appear as humans. So much so that people believe they're actually human. Which means that if you ever saw an angel, he's not going to have wings. He's not going to look like what you would picture an angel looking like. No, he's going to look like a human. He's going to look so much like a human that you're just going to think he's another guy. Genesis chapter 19. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways. And they said, nay, but we will abide in the street all night. Not a good idea in Sodom. If you're a new guy in town, not a good idea. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. Now these are angels, and they look like humans, and they can eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came in to thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Now, this video will probably be labeled hate speech, if anybody pays any attention to it. But the sin of Sodom was homosexuality. And God says that it was very wicked. And these men that were pounding at the door, wanting these two new guys to come out so that they could have sex with them. That's what that refers to, that we may know them as Adam knew his wife and she conceived and bare a son. That's the know that they're referring to. And Lot went out the door unto them and shut the door after him. And watch what this guy does. Now, Lot is born again. Lot is Abraham's nephew. And there was a time when they were traveling together, but they got so big and there were so many rivalries between the families that they decided to split off. And so Lot looked out towards where the green pasture was, looking strictly at economic issues and not spiritual, and headed towards Sodom. And he started off living outside of Sodom. By the time the angels get there, he's living right there in the gate. He's one of the leaders of the city of Sodom. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago the passage that says that evil communications can corrupt good manners. Well, get ready to see how evil communications can corrupt good manners and take this child of God and turn him into one of the most despicable people that we read about in the book of Genesis. Any of you that have daughters, I want you to consider what he's going to say here and ask yourself the question, would I do likewise? If I had guests in my house, would I offer my daughters in place of these guests for these men to have their way with, just to satisfy them so that my guests can be safe? Does it sound like a Christian thing to do? But that's exactly what he did. Verse 8, Behold now, I have 2 daughters, which have not known men. He's got virgin daughters. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes, only unto these men do nothing, for therefore they came under the shadow of my roof. I guess that's being hospitable. Maybe in this day and age, maybe that's normal. And they said, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot back into the house to them and shut the door. And you remember, I think it was last week, I made the point, one of the things that angels did, they killed 185,000 men in one night. You remember that? Well, they're going to about ready to do pretty much the same. They're not going to kill them, but they're going to leave a whole city full of people with a condition that doesn't help them much. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. Even though they're struck with blindness, they're still trying to get to the door and get the door open so that they can have sex with these angels. That's Sodom, folks, and that's where we're headed. That's where our country is headed right now. The fact that we accept that type of a lifestyle, which I've seen this change in the course of my lifetime from one end to the other. In about 50 years, I've seen the entire thing change over to where at one time that was even though it's always been around, it was looked down upon. Now, it's more than accepted. And you know what happened to Sodom? God rained fire and brimstone on it and destroyed it. And we wonder what's going to happen here. You know what happened to the Grecian Empire when they embraced that lifestyle? You know, in Greece, the only reason that a man had a wife was to bear children. If he actually wanted to enjoy sex, he did that with a young man. And is Greece around anymore? No. What about the Roman Empire? Same thing happened to them. You want to know what will happen to America? Same thing that happened to Greece, same thing that happened to Rome. Humans don't ever seem to learn their lessons, and that's why we define it as total depravity. So our resurrected bodies will be material in their primary mode of existence, but they'll be capable of dematerializing. And that would be kind of cool. In John chapter 20, in verse 19, I believe we already looked at this. Or we looked at something like it. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. He was able to materialize right in the room. Didn't need a door, didn't need a window. That'll be kind of cool. Be no need for doors. And over in Acts chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. And when he had spoken these things, this is Christ, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them in white apparel. You will be able to defy gravity, as Christ was able to defy gravity and ascend into heaven. So a lot of the things that we deal with down here won't apply to this spiritual body. Now, one thing that we find over in Luke chapter 20, and this creates some questions for what this body will be like. Luke chapter 20, verse 34. The Jews have just asked him, they've laid out this long question where you've got some, in Jewish law, if you're married to someone and you don't have any children and you die, then your brother is supposed to take your wife and she would bear children for you. Well, so they come up with this scenario where this woman has been married a bunch of times because she keeps marrying brothers and they're all falling over dead. So the question is, in the resurrection, whose wife is she going to be? Right? That's the context here. And Jesus answers the question, verse 34. Jesus answering said unto them, the children of this world marry and are given in marriage. But they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain that world and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. We're not married in heaven. We're like angels. Angels don't marry. something else. And that is, and I've alluded to this already, the spiritual body that will be given will be capable of beholding and conversing with spiritual and glorified beings, which we can't do now. Unless God opens our eyes to see these things, we can't do this. And he doesn't open your eyes very often. He's never opened mine. I've never seen any of this stuff. Back in the Old Testament, we have some examples where he did, which tells me that he still could if he wanted to. But again, need to know basis, and right now we don't need to know. Look at Numbers chapter 22. And here we have the story of Balaam. And God had told Balaam, Balaam was basically a prophet for profit. In other words, he was a prophet, but he sold his services to the highest bidder. Who'd ever pay him the most, well, then he'd prophesy for that guy and tell him what he wanted to hear, basically. He was a politician. Numbers 22, well, we're going to begin at verse 19. Well, verse 20. Well, okay, 19. Now therefore I pray you, tarry ye also here this night, that I may know what the Lord will say unto me more. And God came to Balaam at night and said unto him, now watch this, this is important. If the men come to call thee, rise up and go with them. But yet the word which I shall say unto thee, that shall thou do. Okay? So in the morning, somebody comes to get you, go with them. Make sense? What if nobody comes to get you? Well, that would be different, wouldn't it? That would be different. And look at verse 21. Balaam rose up in the morning and saddled his ass and went with the princes of Moab. Nobody came to him to tell him to go. He just did it on his own. And that kind of made God mad a little bit. And God's anger was kindled because he went. And the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him. Now he was riding upon his ass, and his 2 servants were with him. And the ass saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand. And the ass turned aside out of the way and went into the field. Donkey's not stupid. He sees an angel of the Lord with a sword in his hand and says, I'm out of here. So he heads to the field, goes the other way. And Balaam smote the ass to turn her into the way, because Balaam can't see this angel. Only the donkey can see the angel. But the angel of the Lord stood in the path of the vineyards, a wall being on this side and a wall on that side. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she thrust herself into the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. And he smote her again. And the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where was no way to turn either to the right hand or to the left. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she fell down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he smote the ass with the staff. And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass. And she said unto Balaam, what have I done unto thee, that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? And Balaam said, this is the part that I find kind of funny. Balaam didn't say, whoa, a talking ass. No, he converses with this donkey as if, it's just another day, no big deal. Balaam said unto the ass, Because thou hast mocked me, I would there were a sword in my hand, for now I'd kill thee. And the ass said unto Balaam, Am I not thine ass, which upon which thou hast ridden ever since I was thine unto this day? Was I ever wont to do so unto thee? And he said, Nay. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand, and he bowed down his head and fell flat on his face. You see, there are things around here that are here all the time, but you just don't know it. You can't see them. That doesn't mean they're not here. But in a resurrected body, you'll be able to see these things, and you'll be able to converse with these things. Look at 2 Kings chapter 6. Verses 15 through 17. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. They look out here, they're getting ready to fight a battle, and the hills are just covered with the enemy. How in the world are we going to beat this one down? Don't worry about it. We got more than they do. Well, the guy couldn't see them, but he said that we've got more than them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Angels were there. He couldn't see them. Didn't mean they weren't there, but they were there. And in this life, if God opens your eyes to see him, you can see him. In the next life, you'll just be able to see him. Look at Revelation chapter 1 and verse 17. We're going to link a couple of passages together here. This is when John saw the glorified Christ. And he said, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. So that's who this is. This is the glorified Christ. Look at Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 through 11. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. And all the angels stood round about the throne and about the elders and the four beasts, and fell before the throne on their faces and worshiped God. These are things that John was able to see, but you couldn't see them with the natural eye. We wouldn't see these things unless God enabled us to do so. And John was enabled to see all of these things around the throne, that where all we would see would be an empty throne. But they see all of these other beings that are spiritual. Look at Revelation chapter 22, verses 3 through 5. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him, and they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. So these are some of the things that we'll be able to do and see with the spiritual body that's coming. Our present natural body, in its fallen condition, resists our efforts to serve God. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 17. For the flesh lusteth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that you would. And this is something that we struggle with in this present natural body. And the spiritual things that we're talking about here refers to those things that we read about over in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Verses 9 through 14. But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. Now we've discussed a few of these things today, but there's still no way to really understand what that's going to be like. We can talk about certain capabilities that we'll have, but we don't experience it. You can't really understand what it's going to be like when we finally get there. But God hath revealed him unto us by his Spirit. For the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God. For what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of man which is in him? Even so the things of God knoweth no man, but the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God, which things also we speak, not in the words which man's wisdom teacheth, but which the Holy Ghost teacheth, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they're foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they're spiritually discerned. So these things that a born-again person can understand, we still can't experience what it'll be like. We can know more than a non-born-again person can know, but we still don't have the experience of it, and we won't have that. So imagine having a body that together with the soul and the spirit will be wholly absorbed with a vision of God, and it will never pull us from him. Such will be the nature of the spiritual body at the resurrection. And it's usually when we try to step away from God, that's when we usually get in trouble, isn't it? That's when we have our problems. When we fight against him, that's when we run into difficulties. Well, we won't have that anymore. The resurrection body won't have that. Now we're told over in 1 John 3 and verse 2, it doth not yet appear what we shall be. We don't know what this is going to look like. We can get some ideas out of Scripture as to what will happen, but we don't really know what it's going to look like yet. The word appear means to come forth into view, as from a place or state of concealment, or from a distance to become visible. We've not seen a glorified spiritual body. None of us have. And we won't until we get there. We're not given all the details regarding our future body. As an example, there won't be a need for toilets in heaven. There will not be a need for an elimination system within your body because there's nothing that corrupts. So you won't spend hours behind a door somewhere. There's no reason for it. Will there be a need for an immune system? We have people here that struggle with immune issues. Will there be immune issues in heaven? No. So why would you even have to worry about an immune system? Will there be any need for sexual organs, considering that you don't marry and don't have any offspring? There are a lot of things that these bodies will look different from what we're used to. We can't really expect us to be exactly the same, for the body to be exactly the same, because a lot of the things that we need down here, we won't need there. They just won't be needed. Okay, well, we finished one verse this morning, and we will pick up with the next section next week, if Lord willing. Let's stand and be dismissed in prayer.